warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Hsieh, and at this moment I'd like to do statistical analysis in survey study from Seong and Chen Hsieh article. And the article that I will present entitled Effective Variable and Willingness to Communicate of EFL Learners in class, out of class, and digital context. And this article published at Journal System in 2019. Now, before I start to explain more about this article, let me show you the outline of my presentation. Well, here in the slide, you can see that there are 8 parts of my presentation. First is the purpose of this study. Second is research question. Third is methodology used. Fourth is result and then discussion. Next is strength, weaknesses, and the last is benefit to use. Now let's move to the first part of my presentation. It's about the purpose why Seong and Chen Hsieh conducted this study. The study aims to examine the relationship between effective variables and the willingness to communicate in second language in class, out of class, and digital context, along with pedagogical implication for ELT. The result of this study will contribute to advancing our understanding of the link between effective variable and willingness to communicate in second language in 3 different communicative contexts. Now, talking about the research question, there are 2 research questions in this study. First research question: to what extent do effective variables correlate to EFL student second language willingness to communicate in class, out of class, and digital context? Second research question: what effective variables are significant predictors of EFL students' second language willingness to communicate in class, out of class, and digital context? Now let's move to the methodology. The total participant in the study is 261 EFL undergraduate students from 1 comprehensive university in central Taiwan. And they represented a variety of non-English disciplines, for example, finance, social work, and law. Now jump to the instrument. The questionnaire consisted of 3 parts. First part, 21 item effective variable, 12 item second language willingness to communicate, and third part, demographic data. The third part was designed to elicit student demographic data such as gender, academic year, length of time studying English, and overseas experience. About the data collection, the participants who agreed to voluntarily take part in the study filled in an online questionnaire. Now, about the data analysis, descriptive data were first examined to show the demographic nature of the participant and to describe their degree of effective variable and second language willingness to communicate. To address research question number 1, a Pearson correlation analysis was performed to analyze the relationship between effective variable and second language willingness to communicate in class, out of class, and digital context. And to answer research question number 2, multiple regression analysis were conducted to determine the predictive power of 4 effective variables on second language willingness to communicate in a class, out of class, and digital context. Before discussing about the result from quantitative analysis, it would be beneficial to examine the validity and reliability of the instrument. As the author wrote in the article, the instrument includes the assessment of 4 effective variables. First is second language self-confidence. There are 6 items. Second language anxiety, 6 items. Second language motivation, 4 items. And grit, 5 items. And the assessment of measure EFL students, second language willingness to communicate in class, 4 items. Out of class, 4 items. And digital context, also 4 items. And construct validity and reliability of the instrument were also evaluated using exploratory factor analysis, or as we know it is EFA and Cronbach alpha. Okay, now let's see table 1. As shown in table 1, the data of the mean, standard deviation, and both skewness and kurtosis between -2 and +2 were normally distributed. Additionally, the Kaiser-Meyer-Olkin, or KMO, value was 0.92, exceeding the accepted threshold of 0.5, and the Bartlett's test of sphericity, or BTS, met statistical significances. Chi-square equal 5004.76, and degree of freedom is 53. P-value less than 0.001, indicating an appropriate factor analysis. Therefore, the data set of this study was suitable for conducting EFA. As regards item selection, 9 problematic items, 2 items from self-confidence, 4 from motivation, and 3 from grit were removed for analysis based on the above mentioned criteria. Okay, although value of factor loading for grit 4 0.35, grit 5 is 0.38, and second language willingness to communicate outside the classroom 4 0.30, and value of communalities for second language self-confidence 6, the score is 0.37, and second language motivation 2, the score is 0.42, were relatively low, and these items were retained due to theoretical alignment. With respect to reliability, value of Cronbach alpha above 0.7 provided evidence of adequate internal consistency for each scale. And then table 1 showed that respondents reported above neutral level of second language self-confidence. Mean is 3.30, standard deviation 0.60. For second language anxiety, mean is 3.20, standard deviation 0.66, and second language motivation mean 3.17 and standard deviation 0.62. As the mean score was above 3, neutral agreement on a 5-point Likert scale, and this indicates that students had generally high levels of second language self-confidence, anxiety, and motivation with respect to studying or using English. In particular, the value of grit 4 mean, the score for mean is 2.29, standard deviation 0.72. I often set a goal but later choose to pursue a different one. It was reverse coded, was scored lowest. As regard the second language willingness to communicate, Second language willingness to communicate in digital context. The score of mean is 3.52 and standard deviation 0.80 was scored highest, followed by second language willingness to communicate outside the classroom. And the score for mean is 3.07, standard deviation 0.75, and second language willingness to communicate inside the classroom, the score for mean 2.86 and standard deviation 0.85. Now table 2, second language willingness to communicate in a class, out of class, and digital context correlated significantly with all the affective variables. In particular, anxiety had a strong negative correlation with second language willingness to communicate in an in-class setting, but moderately negative correlation in an out-of-class setting. Coefficient correlation, yeah, and digital context. Okay, now regression analysis were performed to examine if the independent variables such as affective variables and demographic aspects from the demographic aspect from the participant can be used to predict the dependent variables, that is a second language willingness to communicate within inside classroom, outside classroom, and digital environment. Okay, now move to the table 3. As shown in table 3, second language self-confidence, the score for beta is 0.32 and grit 0.26 were positive predictors of second language willingness to communicate, while second language anxiety, the score for beta is minus 0.30 and gender 3 minus 0.12 were negative predictors of second language willingness to communicate inside the classroom. So the result listed in the table also indicate that 54% of the total variance in second language willingness to communicate inside the classroom could be explained by these 4 observed variables. In addition, regression analysis were performed to examine if the dependent variables, that is a second language willingness to communicate within inside classroom, outside classroom, and digital environment, can be used to predict each other variables. As shown in table 4, second language self-confidence, the score for beta is 0.29 and grit 0.27 were positive predictors of second language willingness to communicate outside the classroom, while second language anxiety was a negative predictor of second language willingness to communicate outside the classroom. And this model accounted for 41% of the variance. And regression analysis result as shown in table 5. Second language self-confidence, the score for beta is 0.25 and grit 0.14 were identified as significant predictors for second language willingness to communicate in digital context, despite its scant predictive power. Okay. Now, let's move to the next part. Is about discussion. Okay, on the slide, we can see the discussion to answer research question number 1. The research question number 1 is, to what extent do affective variables correlate to EFL students' second language willingness to communicate in in a class, out of class, and digital context. The study found that a lack of second language anxiety was a significant predictor of student second language willingness to communicate in non-digital environment inside and outside the classroom, but not in the digital setting. Now, second language anxiety plays an important role in Taiwanese EFL students. Taiwanese EFL students' second language communicative behavior in offline setting. The second conclusion drawn from this finding is that there was no significant association between second language anxiety and second language willingness to communicate in digital setting. Put differently, second language anxiety didn't play a major role in influencing EFL student willingness to communicate in second language digital social situation. And this is based on students' confidence in communicating through digital methods rather than conventional offline approaches. Also, digital environment may provide social support and additional psychological benefits. Okay, which potentially contribute to creating less second language anxiety provoking environment for EFL students. And now research question number 2. What effective variables are significant predictors of EFL students' second language willingness to communicate in a class, out of class, and digital context? Grit and second language self-confidence were significant predictors of students' second language willingness to communicate in all three communicative settings, in class, out of class, and digital context. And the results show that grit and second language willingness to communicate show that Taiwanese EFL students who work hard for long-term goals seem to be looking for more opportunities to practice and improve their communicative skills. The result regarding a significant relationship between second language willingness to communicate and second language Taiwanese EFL students who felt more confidence communicating in English tended to make more attempts to initiate English communication in a social context, whether it was face-to-face or in a virtual situation. Okay, now let's move to the next slide. It's about strength. The first strength is the advantage of this study lies in the number of participants who can represent a large number of measurements. In addition, the participants involved are active, representative of various non-English disciplines, finance, social work, and law. And second strength is, in general, the results in this study are presented in a full and in detail from various quantitative aspects such as tables supported by the explanation that follows. And the last strength, the study is also equipped with related articles which are useful to strengthen the research result. Now move to the weaknesses. There are 5 weaknesses. First, because the data obtained came from a self-reported questionnaire, the participant responses that tended to be inconsistent made it difficult for the researcher to draw definite conclusion. And second weakness, in this study, there is still uncertainty regarding students' willingness to communicate in second language preferences in a digital context, whether it is based on oral or written communication. The second weakness is the grid scale in the study was not designed specifically to measure second language students. Next weakness is there were 4 second language motivational items that were removed in the EFA process that might have influenced the outcome. The last weakness, the study didn't measure second language anxiety in a digital context due to the lack of measure available in this context. Well, now the last part of my presentation is benefit to use. The result of this study can in general provide pedagogical suggestion for second language instruction, given that great second language self-confidence and second language anxiety play significant roles in facilitating students' second language willingness to communicate. Foreign language instructor may consider developing and implementing lessons and activities that can foster great and second language self-confidence but reduce second language anxiety. Well, that's my presentation. Thank you very much. See you next time.